Hello and welcome to Goodnight Flagstaff. I'm Margarita Bauza. Thank you for tuning in to our community story time. You can find a new chapter from one of our favorite family-friendly books at 8 p.m. each weeknight on the Literacy Center's YouTube channel and on Creator Radio, a local online radio station. The previous chapter is replayed on Creator Radio each weeknight at about 7:30, just before the new chapter airs. You can also listen to all previous Goodnight Flagstaff recordings on YouTube. We're currently reading The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkein. If you'd like to check it out to read along with us at home, it's available at the library. Check one out today with your Coconino County Library card. Please email us if you'd like to join our team of readers and connect with your community through stories. All ages are welcome. Our email is goodnightflagstaff@gmail.com. Last time we read together, the Fellowship of the Ring continued their journey south. Gandalf and Aragorn decided to go the way Gandalf suggested, although Aragorn thought it might be too difficult, and it did prove to be exactly that. They went as far as they could up the mountain called Caradhras. The way became more steep and difficult, and then they encountered the snow. The hobbits were about to be buried in it until Aragorn and Boromir tunneled the path back the way they'd come. Once they were safe, they set off on a new course, but the new course was even more dangerous. Chapter 4, A Journey in the Dark. It was evening, and the great light was again waning fast when they halted for the night. They were very weary, the mountains were veiled in deepening dusk, and the wind was cold. Gandalf spared them one more mouthful of the Muravor of Rivendell. When they had eaten some food, he called a council. "We cannot, of course, go on tonight," he said. "The attack on the Redhorn Gate has tired us out, and we must rest for a while." "And then where are we to go?" asked Frodo. "We still have our journey and our errand before us," answered Gandalf. "We have no choice but to go on, or to return to Rivendell." Pippin's face brightened visibly at the mere mention of return to Rivendell. Merry and Sam looked up hopefully, but Aragorn and Boromir made no sign. Frodo looked troubled. "I wish I was back there," he said. "But how can I return without shame, unless there is indeed no other way, and we're already defeated?" "You're right, Frodo," said Gandalf. "To go back is to admit defeat, and face worse defeat to come. If we go now, then the ring must remain there. We shall not be able to set out again. Then sooner or later, Rivendell will be besieged, and after a brief and bitter time, it will be destroyed. The ring-wraiths are deadly enemies, but they are only shadows yet of the power and terror they would possess if the ruling ring was on their master's hand again. Then we must go on if there's a way," said Frodo with a sigh. Sam sank back into gloom. "There is a way that we may attempt," said Gandalf. "I thought from the beginning, when first I considered their journey, that we should try it. But it is not a pleasant way, and I have not spoken it to the company before." Aragorn was against it until the pass over the mountains had at least been tried. If it is a worse road than the Redhorn Gate, then it must be evil indeed," said Merry. "But you had better tell us about it, and let us know the worst at once." "The road that I speak of leads to the mines of Moria," said Gandalf. Only Gimli lifted up his head. A smoldering fire was in his eyes. On all the others, a dread fell at the mention of that name. Even to the hobbits, it was a legend of vague fear. "The road may lead to Moria, but how can we hope that it will lead through Moria?" said Aragorn darkly. "It is a name of ill omen," said Boromir. "Nor do I see the need to go there. If we cannot cross the mountains, let us journey southwards until we can come to the Gap of Rohan, where men are friendly to my people, taking the road that I followed on my way hither. Or we may pass by and cross the Isen into Langstrand and Lebanon, and so come to Gondor from the regions nigh to the sea." "Things have changed since you came north," Boromir answered Gandalf. "Did you not hear what I told you of Saruman? With him I may have business of my own ere all is over. But the ring must not come near Isengard, if that can by any means be prevented. The Gap of Rohan is closed to us while we go with the bearer. As for the longer road, we cannot afford the time. We might spend a year in such a journey, and we shall pass through many lands that are empty and harborless. Yet they would not be safe. The watchful eyes of Saruman and of the enemy are on them. When you came north, Boromir, you were in the enemy's eyes, only one stray wanderer from the south, and a matter of small concern to him. His mind was busy with the pursuit of the ring, but you return now as a member of the ring's company, and you are in peril as long as you remain with us. The danger will increase with every league that we go south under the naked sky. Since our open attempt on the mountain pass, our plight has become more desperate, I fear. I see now little hope if we do not soon vanish from sight for a while and cover our trail. Therefore, I advise that we should go neither over the mountain nor around them, but under them. That's a road, at any rate, that the enemy will least expect us to take. We do not know what he expects, said Boromir. He may watch all roads, likely and unlikely. In that case, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap, hardly better than knocking at the gates of the Dark Tower itself. The name Moria is black. You speak of what you do not know. When you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron, answered Gandalf, I alone of you have ever been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord, and only in his older and lesser dwelling in Dol Guldur. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return, but I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. If there are orcs there, it may prove ill for us, that is true, but most of the orcs of the Misty Mountains are scattered or destroyed in the Battle of Five Armies. The eagles report that orcs are gathering again from afar, but there's a hope that Moria is still free. There's even a chance that dwarves are there, and that in some deep hall of his fathers, Balin, son of Fundin, may be found. However it may prove, one must tread the path that need chooses. I will tread the path with you, Gandalf said Gimli. I will go and look on the halls of Durin, whatever may wait there, if you can find the doors that are shut. Good, Gimli, said Gandalf. You encourage me. We will seek the hidden doors together, and we will come through. In the ruins of the dwarves, a dwarf's head will be less easy to bewilder than elves or men or hobbits. Yet it will not be the first time that I have been to Moria. I sought there long for Thrain, son of Thor, after he was lost. I passed through, and I came out again alive. I too once passed the Dimril Gate, said Aragorn quietly. But though I also came out again, the memory is very evil. I do not wish to enter Moria a second time. And I don't wish to enter it even once, said Pippin. Nor me, muttered Sam. Of course not, said Gandalf. Who would? But the question is, who will follow me if I lead you there? I will, said Gimli eagerly. I will, said Aragorn heavily. You followed my lead almost to disaster in the snow and have said no word of blame. I will follow your lead now if the last warning does not move you. It is not the ring, nor of us others that I am thinking now, but of you, Gandalf. And I say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware. I will not go, said Boromir, not unless the vote of the whole company is against me. What do Legolas and the little folk say? The Rainbear's voice should be heard. I do not wish to go to Moria, said Legolas. The hobbits said nothing. Sam looked at Frodo. At last Frodo spoke. I do not wish to go, he said, but neither do I wish to refuse the advice of Gandalf. I bet that there should be no vote until we have slept in. I beg that there should be no vote until we have slept in. Gandalf will get votes easier in the light of the morning than in this cold gloom. How the wind howls. At these words, all fell into silent thought. They heard the wind hissing among the rocks and trees, and there was a howling and wailing around them in the empty spaces of the night. Suddenly, Aragorn leapt to his feet. How the wind howls, he cried. It is howling with wolf voices. The wargs have come west of the mountains. Need we wait until morning then, said Gandalf. It is as I said, the hunt is up. Even if we live to see the dawn, who now will wish to journey south by night with the wild wolves on his trail? How far is Moria? Asked Boromir. There was a door southwest of Caradras, some 15 miles of the crow flies, and maybe 20 as the wolf runs, answered Gandalf grimly. Then let us start as soon as it is light tomorrow if we can, said Boromir. The wolf that one hears is worse than the orc that one hears. True, said Aragorn, loosening his sword in his sheath, but where the warg howls, there also the orc prowls. I wish I had taken Elrond's advice, muttered Pippin to Sam, and I am no good after all. There is not enough of the breed of Bandobras, the bull roar, in me. These howls freeze my blood. I don't ever remember feeling so wretched. My heart's right down in my toes, Mr. Pippin, said Sam, but we aren't eaten yet, and there are some stout folks here with us. Whatever may be in store for old Gandalf, I'll wager it isn't a wolf's belly. For their defense in the night of the company climbed to the top of the small hill under which they had been sheltering. It was crowned with a knot of old and twisted trees, about which I lay a broken circle of boulder stones. In the midst of this, they lit a fire, for there was no hope that darkness and silence would keep their trail from discovery by the hunting packs. Round the fire they sat, and those that were not on guard dozed uneasily. Poor Bill, the pony, trembled and sweated where he stood. The howling of the wolves was now all around them, sometimes nearer and sometimes further off. In the dead of night, many shining eyes were seen peering over the brow of the hill. Some advanced almost to the ring of stones. At a gap in the circle, a great dark wolf shape could be seen halted, gazing at them. A shuddering howl broke from him, as if he were a captain summoning his pack to the assault. Gandalf stood up and strode forward, holding his staff alone. "Listen, hound of Sauron," he cried. "Gandalf is here. Fly if you value your foul skin. I will shrivel you from tail to snout if you come within this ring." The wolf snarled and sprang towards them with a great leap. At that moment, there was a sharp twang. Legolas had loosened his bow. There was a hideous yell, and the leaping shape thudded to the ground. The elvish arrow had pierced its throat. The watching eyes were suddenly extinguished. Gandalf and Aragorn strode forward, but the hill was deserted. The hunting packs had fled. All about them the darkness grew silent, and no cry came on the sighing wind. The night was old, and westward the waning moon was setting, gleaming fitfully through the breaking clouds. Suddenly, Frodo started from sleep. Without warning, a storm of howls broke up fierce and wild all about the camp. A great host of wargs had gathered silently and was now attacking them from every side at once. "Fling fuel on the fire," cried Gandalf to the hobbits. "Draw your blades and stand back to back." In the leaping light, as the fresh wood blazed up, Frodo saw many gray shapes spring over the ring of stones. More and more followed. Through the throat of one huge leader, Aragorn passed his sword with a thrust. With a great sweep, Boromir hewed the head off another. Beside them, Gimli stood with his stout legs apart, wielding his dwarf axe. The bow of Legolas was singing. In the wavering firelight, Gandalf seemed suddenly to grow. He rose up, a great menacing shape, like a monument of some ancient king of stone, set upon a hill. Stooping like a cloud, he lifted a burning branch and strode to meet the wolves. They gave back before him. High in the air, he tossed the blazing brand. It flared with a sudden white radiance, like lightning, and his voice rolled into thunder. "Nar adre thamen, nardan I brath," he cried. There was a roar and a crackle, and the tree above him burst into a leaf and bloom of blinding flame. The fire leapt from treetop to treetop. The whole hill was crowned with dazzling light. The swords and knives of the defenders shone and flickered. The last arrow of Legolas kindled in the air as it flew and plunged burning into the heart of a great wolf chieftain. All the others fled. Slowly the fire died till nothing was left but falling ash and sparks. A bitter smoke curled above the burned tree stumps and blew darkly from the hill as the first light of dawn came dimly into the sky. Their enemies were routed and did not return. "What did I tell you, Mr. Pippin?" said Sam, sheathing his sword. Wolves won't get him." That was an eye-opener, and no mistake, nearly singed my hair off my head. When the full light of the morning came, no signs of the wolves were to be found, and they looked in vain for the bodies of the dead. No trace of the fight remained, but the charred trees and the arrows of Legolas laying on the hilltop. All were damaged, save one, of which only the point was left. "It is as I feared," said Gandalf. "There were no ordinary wolves hunting for food in the wilderness. Let us eat quickly and go." The day the weather changed again, almost as if it was at the command of some power that had no longer any use for snow, since they had retreated from the pass, a power that wished now to have a clear light. Things that moved in the wild could be seen from far away. The wind had been turning through north to northwest during the night, and now it failed. The clouds vanished southwards, and the sky was opened, high and blue, and they stood upon the hillside ready to depart. A pale sunlight gleamed over the mountain tops. "You must reach the doors before sunset," said Gandalf, "or I fear we shall not reach them at all. It is not far, but our path may be winding. For here Aragorn cannot guide us. He has seldom walked in this country, and only once have I been under the west wall of Moria, and that was long ago. There it lies," he said, pointing away southeastwards to where the mountainsides fell sheer into the shadows at their feet. In the distance could be dimly seen a line of bare cliffs, and in the midst, taller than the rest, one great gray wall. "When we left the pass, I led you southwards and not back to our certain starting point, and some of you may have noticed. It is well that I did so, for now we have several miles less to cross, and haste is needed. Let us go." "I do not know which to hope," said Boromir grimly. That Gandalf will find what he seeks, or that coming to the cliff we shall find the gates lost forever. All choices seem ill, and to be caught between wolves and the wall, the likeliest chance. Lead on." Gimli now walked ahead by the wizard's side, so eager was he to come to Moria. Together they led the company back towards the mountains. The only road of old to Moria from the west had lain along the course of a stream to Ciranon that ran out from the feet of the cliffs near where the doors had stood. But either Gandalf was astray, or else the land had changed in recent years, for he did not strike the stream where he looked to find it, only a few miles southwards from the start. The morning was passing towards noon, and still the company wandered and scrambled in a barren country of red stones. Nowhere could they see any gleam of water or hear any sound of it. All was bleak and dry. Their hearts sank. They saw no living thing, and not a bird was in the sky. But what the night would bring, if it caught them in that lost land, none of them cared to think. Suddenly, Gimli, who had pressed on ahead, called back to them. He was standing on a knoll and pointing to the right. Hurrying up, they saw below them a deep and narrow channel. It was empty and silent, and hardly a trickle of water followed among the brown and red stained stones of its bed. But on the near side there was a path, much broken and decayed, that wound its way among the ruined walls and paving stones of an ancient highroad. "Ah, here it is at last," said Gandalf. "This is where the stream ran, Ciranon, the Gate Stream, they used to call it. But what has happened to the water I cannot guess. It used to be swift and noisy. Come, we must hurry on, we are late." The company were footsore and tired, but they trudged doggedly along the rough and winding track for many miles. The sun turned from the noon and began to go west. After a brief halt and a hasty meal, they went on again. Before then, the mountains frowned, but their path lay in a deep trough of land, and they could see only the higher shoulders and the far eastward peaks. At length, they came to a sharp bend. There the road, which had been veering southwards towards the brink of the channel and a steep fall of the land to the left, turned and went due east again. Rounding the corner, they saw before them a low cliff, some 5 fathoms high, with a broken and jagged top. Over it, a trickling water dripped through a wide cleft that seemed to have been carved out by a fall that had once been strong and full. "Indeed, things have changed," said Gandalf, "but there is no mistaking the place. There's all that remains of the stair falls. If I remember right, there was a flight of steps cut in the rock at their side, but the main road wound away left and climbed with several loops up to the level ground at the top. There used to be a shallow valley beyond the falls right up to the walls of Moria, and the Ceranon flowed through it with the road beside it. Let us go and see what the things are like now." They found the stone steps without difficulty, and Gimli sprang swiftly up them, followed by Gandalf and Frodo. When they reached the top, they saw that they could not go further that way, and the reason for the drying up of the gate stream was revealed. Behind them, the sinking sun filled the cool western sky with glimmering gold. Before them stretched a dark, still lake. Neither sky nor sunset was reflected on its sullen surface. The Ceranon had been dammed and had filled all the valley. Beyond the ominous water were reared vast cliffs, their stern faces pallid in the fading light, final and impassable. No sign of a gate or entrance, not a fissure or crack could Frodo see in the frowning stone. "There are the walls of Moria," said Gandalf, pointing across the water, "and there the gate stood once upon a time, the elven door at the end of the road from Holland by which we have come. But this way is blocked. None of the company, I guess, will wish to swim this gloomy water at the end of the day. It has an unwholesome look. We must find a way round the northern edge," said Gimli. "The first thing for the company to do is to climb up that main path and see where that will lead us. Even if there were no lake, we could not get our baggage pony up this stair. But in any case, we cannot take the poor beast into the mines," said Gandalf. "The road under the mountains is a dark road, and there are places narrow and steep which he cannot tread, even if we can." "Poor old Bill," said Frodo. "I had not thought of that. And poor Sam, I wonder what he will say." "I'm sorry," said Gandalf. "Poor Bill has been a useful companion, and it goes to my heart to turn him adrift now. I would have traveled lighter and brought no animal, least of all this one that Sam is fond of, if I had had my way. I feared all along that we should be obliged to take this road." The day was drawing to its end, and cold stars were glinting in the sky, high above the sunset, when the company, with all the speed they could, climbed up the slopes and reached the side of the lake. In breadth, it looked to be no more than 2 to 3 furlongs at the widest. How far it stretched away southward they could not see in the failing light, but its northern end was no more than half a mile from where they stood, and between the stony ridges that enclosed the valley and the water's edge there was a rim of open ground. They hurried forward, for they had still a mile or 2 to go before they could reach the point on the far shore that Gandalf was making for, and then he had still to find the doors. When they came to the northernmost corner of the lake, they found a narrow creek that barred their way. It was green and stagnant, thrust out like a slimy arm towards the enclosing hills. Gimli strode forward undeterred and found that the water was shallow, no more than the ankle deep at the edge. Behind them they all walked in file, threading their way with care, for under the weedy pools were sliding and greasy stones, and footing was treacherous. Frodo shuddered with disgust at the touch of the dark, unclean water on his feet. As Sam, the last of the company, led Bill up to the dry ground on the far side, there came a soft sound, a swish, followed by a plop, as if a fish had disrupted the still surface of the water. Turning quickly, they saw ripples black-edged with shadow in the waning light. Great rings were widening outwards from a point far out in the lake. There was a bubbling noise and then a silence. The dusk deepened, and the last gleams of the sunset were veiled in cloud. Gandalf now pressed on a great pace, and the others followed as quickly as they could. They reached a strip of dry land between the lake and the cliffs. It was narrow, often hardly a dozen yards across, and encumbered with fallen rock and stones, but they found a way, hugging the cliff and keeping as far from the dark water as they might. A mile southwards along the shore, they came upon holly trees. Stumps and dead boughs were rotting in the shallows, the remains, it seemed, of old thickets, or of a hedge that had once lined the road across the drowned valley. But close under the cliff there stood, still strong and living, 2 tall trees, larger than any trees of holly that Frodo had ever seen or imagined. Their great roots spread from the wall to the water. Under the looming cliffs, they had looked like bushes when seen far off from the top of the stair. But now they towered overhead, stiff, dark, and silent, throwing deep night shadows above their feet, standing like sentinel pillars at the end of the road. "Well, here we are at last," said Gandalf. "Here the elven way from Hollin ended. Hollin was token of the people of the land, and they planted here to mark the end of their domain. For the west door was made chiefly for their use in their traffic with the lords of Moria. There were happier days, then there was still close friendship at times between folk of different race, even between dwarves and elves. It was not the fault of the dwarves that the friendship waned," said Gimli. "I have not heard that it was the fault of the elves," said Legolas. "I have heard both," said Gandalf, "and I will not give judgment now. But I beg of you two, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends and to help me. I need you both. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand." Turning to the others, he said, "While I am searching, will each of you make ready to enter the mines? For here I fear we must say farewell to our good beast of burden. You must lay aside much of the stuff that we brought against bitter weather. You will not need it inside, nor I hope, when we come through and journey on down into the south. Instead, each of us must take a share of what the pony carried, especially the food and the water skins." "But you can't leave poor old Bill behind in this forsaken place, Mr. Gandalf," cried Sam, angry and distressed. "I won't have it, and that's that. After he has come so far and all." "I'm sorry, Sam," said the wizard, "but when the door opens, I do not think you'll be able to drag your Bill inside into the long dark of Moria. You will have to choose between Bill and your master." "He'd follow Mr. Frodo into a dragon's den if I let him," protested Sam. "It'd be nothing short of murder to turn him loose with all these wolves about." "It would be short of murder," said Gandalf. He laid his hand on the pony's head and spoke in a low voice. "Go with words of guard and guiding on you," he said. "You are a wise beast and have learned much in Rivendell. Make your ways to places where you can find grass and come in time to Elrond's house, or wherever you wish to go. There, Sam, you will have quite as much of a chance of escaping wolves and getting home as we have." Sam stood sullenly by the pony and returned no answer. Bill, seeming to understand well what was going on, nuzzled up to him, putting his nose to Sam's ear. Sam burst into tears and fumbled with the straps, unloading all the pony's packs and throwing them to the ground. The others sorted out the goods, making a pile of all that could be left behind and divvying up the rest. When this was done, they turned to watch Gandalf. He appeared to have done nothing. He was standing between 2 trees, gazing at the blank wall of the cliff as if he would bore a hole into it with his eyes. Gimli was wandering about, tapping the stone here and there with his axe. Legolas was pressed up against the rock as if listening. "Well, here we are, and already," said Merry. "But where are the doors? I can't see any of them." "Dwarf doors were not made to be seen when shut, said Gimli. They are invisible, and their own masters cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten. But this door was not made to be secret, known only to dwarves, said Gandalf, coming suddenly to life and turning around. Unless things are already altogether changed, eyes that know what to look for may discover the sign. He walked forward to the wall. Right between the shadow of the trees there was a smooth space, and over this he passed his hands to and fro, muttering under his breath. Then he stepped back. Look, will you see anything now? The moon now shone upon the gray face of the rocks, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then slowly on the surface, where the wizard's hands had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running into the stone. At first they were no more than pale gossamer threads, so fine that they only twinkled fitfully where the moon caught them, but steadily they grew broader and clearer until their design could be guessed. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, there was an arch of interlacing letters in an elvish character. Below, through the threads were in places blurred or broken. The outline could be seen as an anvil and a hammer surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these, again, were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else, there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. There are the emblems of Durin, cried Gimli, and there's a tree of the high elves, said Legolas. And the star of the house of Fëanor, said Gandalf. They were fraught of Ithildin, that mirrors were only starlight and moonlight, and sleeps until it is touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten in Middle Earth. It is long since I heard them, and I thought deeply about how I could recall them to my mind. What does the writing say? Asked Frodo, who was trying to decipher the inscript of the arch. I thought I knew the elf letters, but I could not read these. The words are in the elven tongue of the West Middle Earth in the elder days, answered Gandalf, but they do not say anything of importance to us. They say only, the doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak, friend, and enter. And underneath small and faint letters, I, Narvi, made them. Celebrum door of Holland drew these signs. What does it mean by speak, friend, and enter? Asked Merry. That's plain enough, said Gimli. If you're a friend, speak the password, and the doors will open, and you can enter. Yes, said Gandalf. These doors are probably governed by words. Some dwarf gates will open only at times and for particular reasons, and some had locks and keys that are still needed when all necessary times and words are known. These doors have no key. In the days of Durin, they were not secret. They usually stood open and door wards sat there. But if they were shut, any who knew the opening word could speak it and pass in. At least so it is recorded. It is not, Gimli? It is, said the dwarf. But what the word was is not remembered. Narvi and his craft and all his kindred had vanished from the earth. But do not you know the word, Gandalf? Said Boromir in surprise. No, said the wizard. The others looked dismayed. Only Aragorn, who knew Gandalf well, remained silent and unmoved. Then what was the use of bringing us to this cursed spot? Cried Boromir, glancing back onto the shutter at the dark water. You told us that you had once passed through the mines. How could that be if you did not know how to enter? The answer to your question, Boromir, said the wizard, is that I do not know the word yet, but we shall see. And he added, with a glint in his eyes under the bristling brows, you may ask what is the use of my deeds when they're proven useless. As for your other question, do you doubt in my tale, or have you no wits left? I did not enter this way. I came from the east. If you wish to know, I will tell you that these doors open outwards. From the inside, you may thrust them open with your hands. From the outside, nothing will move them save the spell of command. They cannot be forced inwards. What are you going to do then? Said Pippin, undaunted by the wizard's bristling brows. Knock on the doors with your head, Peregrine Took, said Gandalf. But if that does not shatter them, and I am allowed a little peace from foolish questions, I will seek for the opening words. I once knew every spell in the tongues of elves or men or orcs. that was ever used for such a purpose. I can still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind. But only a few trials, I think, will be needed, and I shall not have to call on Gimli for words of the secret dwarf tongue that they teach to none. The opening words are elvish, like the writing on the arch that seems certain. He stepped up to the rock again and lightly touched with his staff the silver star in the middle beneath the sign of the anvil. Anon edlen edro hi amen, fenos nogorthrim lasto bethlamen, he said in a commanding voice. The silver lines faded, but the blank gray stone did not stir. Many times he repeated these words in different order or varied them. Then he tried other spells, one after another, speaking now faster and louder, now soft and slow. Then he spoke many single words of elvish speech. Nothing happened. The cliff towered into the night. The countless stars were kindled. The wind blew cold, and the doors stood fast. Again Gandalf approached the wall, and lifting up his arms, he spoke in tones of command and rising wrath. Edro, Edro, he cried, and struck the rock with his staff. Open, open, he shouted, and followed it with the same command in every language that had ever been spoken in the west of Middle-earth. Then he threw his staff to the ground and sat down in silence. Thank you for tuning in. Join us next time for the second part of Chapter 4 in Book 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring. Good night, Flagstaff.